So here we are now back at square one. You've bought some PC parts. They're filthy, or they're just a little bit dirty, and you're OCD. You want your used products to look like brand new. Well, if that's you, you've come to the right place, because I have the obscure, the different, the yes man way of cleaning things to show you guys here today. We are indeed using car products. We have brake cleaner. Now, brake cleaner, one of those things that I've heard from people, some people don't like it. I've been using this stuff for years now, and I haven't had one component die because of it. Besides that is a thing known as WD-40 or just simply degreaser. I use the cheapest stuff on the shelves because I think it's all the same. You're gonna save some money. Now, the good thing about this is this finishes the product. Makes it look really mint. It also, in my opinion, can help protect components. The only component I've had died in recent times is this Cougar power supply here, and that was a new product. But rumor has it, with this Cougar power supply right here, okay, well there's something fell out of it, but had I'd sprayed WD-40 on this thing, it would still be alive today. True fact. But unfortunately it died, so we don't need it anymore. And we've got a power supply here that actually does work, a nice Antec 650 watt power supply. Now, we're gonna be hosing this down. We're gonna be hosing this down here at motherboard. We're gonna be hosing this GTX 960 down, and I'm gonna be going through each and every one of these products, how I use them, why, and what goes through the process of getting a used product from trash to treasure in the 2018 Tech Yes Used Parts Restoral Guide. Get that bone click out of the way. Welcome back to Tech Yes City. This is Brian coming to you guys today with that cleaning guide, and we've got the data vac. This is first up on the bench here. This is like your initial sort of preliminary phase one cleaning product that you use when you just want to give it a generic clean. And sometimes this thing will even do a good job all on its own. This is sometimes all you will have to use. But of course, the first thing before we clean up any of these components, however, is we're going to take them all apart. Now, you notice there is a power supply here, so one thing with power supplies, do make sure they are completely discharged before you start touching them. If you're unsure whether they're discharged, one thing you can do, just to save your life, would be to hose it down and brake clean it before you even take it apart. That way, if there's any electrical charge in there, it'll short itself out, and you've saved yourself your life. And also, if you're wondering how to discharge these things, you can just plug it up to a motherboard with an LED light on it or a power button, and if that LED has gone out, then you'll know that the power supply is now discharged. So now we just pulled the graphics card apart, and we can see here the thermal paste is really crummy and dry. It actually does kind of need a thermal paste reapply really quickly. So that's a good thing we actually pulled this thing apart. The thermal pads here on these two chips here are actually really bad. They're shot. But surprisingly, the thermal pad on the VR himself, that's really good condition. So we'll avoid cleaning that because we don't want to destroy that. However, you can get a thermal pad replacement off eBay or AliExpress. These things are like $1. I'll put a link in the description below. Just the generic ones. Keep in mind though, sometimes you will need a very specific size on these thermal pads, otherwise you could have cooling contact problems. So make sure if you're pulling one off and it does look like it's very close to this die here, make sure you get the right height. So they come from like 0.3 I think to 0.5 to 1 mil. So there's different size variations, so do be careful with that. But initially how we're going to clean this up is we're going to use an alcohol wipe first, and they call it, this is actually in Japanese, it's called alkoru wetto tissue. For some reason they don't sell these in Australia. I mean, you could use another product, especially since we're going to be brake cleaning it after that. But this will enable us to get off all this grime here and also just give it a generic clean, as well as mist these thermal pads, because we're not going to be using brake cleaner on the actual heatsink itself, since it does have this thermal pad on it. We're actually going to be using this here, the data vac blower, to clean up the actual heatsink. But with that said, let's clean up this here with alcohol wipes, and then we'll put the brake cleaner on, clean up this fan, and then we'll put it back together with new thermal paste here, and then we'll put the finishing touches with WD-40 on. So here we are now, we've finished the first stage and we've just got to put the thermal pads now on these two VRAM chips here. And then after that, we will then put the thermal paste on and put the card back together. But of course, before we do that, we'll quickly data vac down the fan and get all the dust off that. But another thing is about this card too, is it's got the power delivery here coming from the PCIe port, yet they've got two 6-pin connectors on it. So very odd configuration on this graphics card itself. One of those weird things. So now we've got the graphics card complete. That is all ready now to go in a build. And the good thing about that is not only did we make it look good, we've got the performance now of something that we can be confident in, because we've changed that thermal paste, we've changed those pads. We know this thing's going to be running 100% now. So that is the graphics card finished. Let's move over now to the big prize here, the motherboard. And this one's pretty much a similar deal, though there are some different things to look out for. So let's start pulling this thing apart. So here it is now, the motherboard is pulled apart and we have the VRM heatsink thermal pads. These are actually in really good condition still. So all we have to do with this heatsink is give it a quick alcohol wipe over. And with this Southbridge heatsink, however, the thermal paste here has hardened up. So we're gonna have to scrape that off. Since it does get really hard, I just tend to fast track it and use a screwdriver because it's not that of an important chip to cool down, especially when we're just overclocking on air anyway. So I usually skip the chase, screwdriver it down. You can use some really hard plastic if you don't want to do any scratching at all. But make sure you don't scratch this at all. So that's actually the die there. So we only want to scratch it off this side, and thankfully the thermal paste is only hardened up on this side. And then of course we're going to go brake cleaner on this whole VRM here. There is dirt in really weird places, sort of in real finicky places. So the brake cleaner does do an excellent job of cleaning that all out, as well as getting into these DDR RAM slots. I have found that after I've sprayed brake cleaner in RAM slots, they have started working properly again as well. So that was a really cool thing. So let's get on with this cleaning. And also don't forget to take your CMOS battery out and also leave your CPU in there until you are ready to brake clean the CPU socket down. So this will be taken out after we've done the rest. So the brake clean is complete, and in the time we're waiting for that to dry off and evaporate, we cleaned down this heatsink here and got that ready, as well as this heatsink here. So you will want to let the brake cleaner evaporate completely. This can take anywhere between usually 20 minutes to an hour. If you want to fast track the process, then you can put a hairdryer on it. That will definitely speed up the evaporating process. However, one thing to keep in mind is you will want to make sure that it's all evaporated if you're spraying down the socket, especially in this part here. If it's still moist in there and you go to turn your CPU on, you may find that your computer won't boot at all. So I have done this once in the past, that's how I know. So yeah, make sure it evaporates completely. Usually if you're doing this one time, I just recommend cleaning all your products, leaving them to air overnight, and then working on them in the morning to put them all back together. So here we are now, we have finished cleaning this motherboard, put it all back together, given it that final WD-40 new look shine, and it is looking so damn schmick at the moment. So what we've got here now, ultimately, is just something you can put into a build, and it will sell the build. When something looks this good, it'll just sell the build on its own. That's one thing about PC parts in general, especially with used builds. Presentation's everything, and it always has been. If we zoom in close here, we can see that those little bits of dust now are all gone. So as before, it was kind of, there was just dust in there. It was even some hair, I believe, was stuck in there. So that's the motherboard now done. So we've got the graphics card and the motherboard done. And I think it's time to move on to the power supply. So now we've just pulled this power supply apart, and it's actually a good thing because I got to see now that I am definitely not going to be using this power supply in a build at all. That will cause problems, and it can be anything from shorting things out to just randomly having the computer restart. As I believe I have tested this power supply in the past and it has worked. I've just never pulled it apart before. So what we're going to do here is, instead of wasting precious brake cleaner on this power supply, we might try and find another power supply to pull apart instead. So now we've just finished hosing this down with brake cleaner, and really for power supplies, that's all you really have to do, is just a good cleansing with brake cleaner. It'll get all that dust and all the hair out. In the past, I have had much dirtier power supplies that I've cleaned down, and the results have been phenomenal. This one was pretty clean from the get-go anyway. However, the last thing you can do, of course, is to give it a nice polishing off with WD-40. That will just protect the components as well. I mean, had that Antec power supply, like, all jokes aside, had that had a good WD-40 protection layer in it, might have been a different story. It might have not fried the way it did. So who knows? But anyway, let's give that the final shine, put it back together, and then we've got one more piece to do. So here it is now, the final component. This is the case, and really when it comes down to a case, it's probably the easiest out of all these components I've shown here today, mainly because it's just a rag and usually WD-40. Of course, if it is dirty enough, it will need the data vac as well. So usually two tools I use on a case is WD-40 and the data vac. However, I would not recommend using brake cleaner on the actual case itself, as sometimes there is a lot of plastic, and brake cleaner is known to sometimes eat away at plastics. So yeah, that's my recommendations there. But let's give this thing a nice before and after. So there it is, guys. This is wrapping up the tutorial on how to clean your PC parts and conquer the universe in 2018. Though, quickly do a recap on what we've got here on the desk. The data vac, that's probably the biggest difference between the last time I did this guide and this time. This thing will save you time. It's also great if you just want to do a quick cleanse on your main rig, get all the dust out, especially hard to reach places. This thing will do a great general generic clean. Of course, it is a little bit expensive. Comes in around about, I think it's 70 USD. So if you're not building computers that much, or if you only want to build one computer like once every 2 years, this is probably going to be a waste of money. But if you're like me and you're building computers constantly, changing things up, this thing is really good. Great product. Next up here, we've got here WD-40, AKA water dispersant. This stuff will do a fantastic job of giving you that final look shine, but also protecting the components after the fact. Now, the one I've got here is not called WD-40. It's called multi-purpose spray. It's essentially like a copy of WD-40. So in your country, you might have different brands. In Australia, this is the cheapest I could find on the shelves. Save myself some money. Does the exact same job in my opinion. In Japan, there was CRC, I think it was 232 or something like that. And the thing about this is a lot of people say, oh, will this short things out? No, I've sprayed this on live electronics in Japan. I even just yesterday sprayed it on a live computer and it was absolutely no problems. Great product. Next up here, we've got alcohol wipes. Now, this is one of the hardest things to find anywhere in the world. In Australia, I think they've got them at Officeworks. They're like $5 for 70 of them. In Japan, these things were like 150 for $1.50. Extremely cheap. And they're probably, if I had to pick one product out of here that I would use the most, it would be alcohol wipes. They're just a godsend. Literally, these things save time. They just clean up GPU dies if you need them to, clean up thermal paste, anything. I even use them around the office just to clean up just dirt and monitors, even glass doors around here. They just save so much time. Fantastic. I'm actually running out of stock, so I gotta get my friend in Japan to send them over more of these. If you're in the US, I'm not sure what they are. When I was over there, I tried these ones that had detergent in them, and since they had detergent in them, they started foaming up, and it was actually a bit of a problem. I wouldn't recommend getting those. Make sure you get the pure alcohol ones. Next up here, we've got the most controversial one here today. This is brake cleaner. Now, some people will say, go out and get ECC, and ECC stands for electrical contact cleaner. Now, if you are really worried about your components, especially if they're like brand new components like a Z370, 8700K for example, or a new Ryzen system, then you may wish to go out and get some ECC. It's about 20 bucks a bottle. This stuff, I've been using this for years. I haven't had one problem with it. It's fantastic. It's about $5 a bottle. In Japan, I think it was like $2 a bottle. It's so cheap, so powerful. It will get into those really hard to reach places. It'll just clean out that dirt and leave it looking brand new, especially after you use the WD-40. So usually I use this first, and then I'll use this after. And also before I get on out here, well, actually two more things before I get on out of here. The reason for cleaning up your parts is also twofold. We do want them looking really good because the final product will sell better when it looks really good. But also we saw as with that power supply, we had a broken power supply. So I'm pretty much chucking that in the bin now. So that was a good thing. That would have just caused me headaches and problems if I had put that in a build, because I actually have tried that power supply before and it still does work, but I wouldn't put that anywhere near a client's build. So I was glad I discovered that. And yeah, that's actually one thing that was good that came out of today's tutorial. The GPU as well. Saw the thermal paste, that was shot, all hardened up. So glad we gave that a new coat. And also before I get on out here, discharging your power supplies too. Big thing. Make sure there's no power left in these things before you take them apart. As you saw with that Asus motherboard I had, plugged it up, made sure that LED light was not on. That means the power supply is discharged and we're good to go. Also with your motherboard, CMOS battery, make sure that's out. And the CPU, I generally leave that in there until I'm cleaning the pins. That's just so I don't accidentally grab the socket and bend the pins, which has the potential to brick the whole motherboard itself. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. If you did, then be sure to hit that like button and let me know in the comment section below which product do you think came up the best here today. Also, if you have any tips and tricks of your own or any products that you use, then be sure to drop a comment in the comment section below. And I'll catch you guys in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye. And that's pretty much the main weaponry there. All right, Papa Giuseppe. Or sometimes even better than brand new. So strap on in, grab yourself a Yes-mobile if you haven't got one already. Off, and we're getting every day.